What's up, YouTube family? Dave Medawar here. Hope you're all having a good day. So this is going to be a fun topic, right? We're going to talk about dating, because I think this can actually become a lot of good follow-on videos, because it's something that I think should be discussed, and I'm taking the approach that perhaps you haven't seen out there, and it's not so common, and hoping it helps. So what we're going to talk about today is the age-old question, why can't I meet a good guy? Why can't I meet a good girl? Why is it that I always attract the same person in my life? So before we get into it, if you like what you see here, I'll invite you to click on that subscribe button. And if you like this video in particular, likes are appreciated, shares with your friends are appreciated. And let's begin. So getting into this question, you have a wide spectrum of a lot of the advice that you see out there. There's a whole realm of dating advice out there that, in my opinion, you can understand where they're coming from, but it can be very harming and detrimental to your growth, right? On one side of the spectrum, you have a very extreme outlook that all men are bad, all women are bad. I've been burned time and time after again. I can't trust anybody. And you can't really blame anybody for having hardship, in a sense that we don't always choose pain in our life. You put your trust into somebody else's hands, and there's actually a quote I've heard that's sad but true, right? Loving somebody else is giving them the key to your heart and trusting that they're not going to break it. And with a lot of trust comes vulnerability. And so people put themselves out there, they get hurt, they get burned, and it sucks. And when it becomes repetition, we sometimes want to throw in the towel. We want to be bitter. We want to just write off people. There's a movement of men that they're going their own way, as they call it, where they just give up on dating and they're like, oh, just be focused on your purpose. And it sounds good, but it really masks a bigger problem of sometimes we don't recognize our part of the problem, and we want to just delegate blames to others that we've dated, right? Because here's the thing. This is not the most pleasant quote. It's probably going to raise eyebrows, but the approach I'm taking here is an honest approach that I hope is maybe not the easiest to hear, but can help all of us out, in that there's a saying, you don't ask yourself why a clown is a clown when you meet a clown. You ask yourself, why do you keep going to the circus? And there's a lot of truth to that quote. It's not the most elegant one. When you look at that question of why do I attract this same kind of guy or the same kind of girl over and over again, right? You meet somebody, rinse and repeat. It's a cycle of infatuation, and then it's a bad outing. And then you start trash talking them. Your friends jump in. They want to support you. Oh, poor you, poor you. You keep meeting this person. You start posting these really cliche memes online about, women, about men, whatever, about dating. And it can be very damaging because it doesn't really invite us to learn from the experience. I actually, in one of my previous videos on the channel, I talk about how the quality of our life really stems from the kind of questions we ask ourselves. And I brought up this whole notion of, when you ask yourself, why me, or why does this happen to me? It's very disempowering, and it essentially makes us a victim to circumstance, because it robs us from the ability to ask better, empowering questions such as, what can I learn from this, and how can I grow, and what is it teaching me? So if we take an approach that's a very jaded approach when it comes to dating, and by no means am I faulting anybody here, because I can relate with all of you. I've had my share of unfortunate experiences as well. And for some time, I took on that similar outlook too of, how can I trust anybody? Or is it going to be the same story? Are they eventually going to do this? Are they eventually going to leave? This, fill in the blank. The problem with this is that it doesn't really beckon change. And so we have to really realize that we are playing a part in this situation. When you invited somebody into your life, when you dated somebody, and it didn't work out, it's very easy when we're hurt to point the finger, pick on their negative qualities that are negative qualities in our eyes, right? Which may not even be negative qualities. It might be a way for us to try and self-sabotage and distance ourselves away from them. But you have to remember, at some point, you chose to date this person. I chose to date this person. So the bigger question now is, what in particular is causing us to repeat this cycle? And more importantly, why is it that we're not changing? Well, I'll talk about this more in other videos about the subconscious, and I talk about it in my book as well, which I have a link to it in the description below. The subconscious likes familiarity, and it really is all about the quickest ways to get our unmet needs met. And that's super important because that can mean something along the lines of you had a bad breakup, you know somebody is bad for you, but it could mean that you're sending them that late night text. You're knocking on their door a week after the breakup. You're reaching out to them, even though you've promised yourself and everybody in your peer group that you wouldn't. And I've been there too. It's something where on a logical, conscious level, we can say we don't want this anymore. We don't want to date that person. But it's our subconscious driven through our belief system and familiarity that's actually driving our actions. That's why you'll see this repeated cycle. You might observe this in your peer group, whether it's on social media or whatever. You'll see from a distance that somebody will post all these flowery memes and all these things on Facebook about why they meet this certain person and why they can't meet somebody better. And then they'll rinse and repeat that cycle of the same kind of relationship. And the thing is that, to be very honest, taking that approach of just kind of sitting back, throwing yourself out there, posting a feel-good message about how you want something better, it's not doing us any good. You have to really tackle the issue at the core itself, and that involves a lot of self-introspect. I just did a video right before this one, or maybe the one before, about journaling and how that's a really good way to reconnect with yourself. Open a journal. Write down a list of 10 things you like in a partner, and then maybe write down a list of 10 things that you find in partners that you don't like. Maybe go back a couple of years, write down the last 5 partners, this list of good and bad of each. And you will notice that it isn't so much the partner in particular that you're dating. It's a common reflection back to you of an energy that we're putting out and the way we're trying to get unmet needs met that is repeating itself. Because life is kind of funny this way. It tends to bring us back situations over and over again until we get the lesson, so to speak. And it's really powerful to think about, because if we look at this in terms of why did he say this? Why did she say this? Why did she leave? Why did he leave? Asking more deeper questions that the subconscious really responds to, such as, what unmet needs do I have that I'm trying to fulfill through this person? Does this remind me of things that maybe happened when I was younger, or in my peer group, maybe in grade school, maybe in familial, family situations, things like that? Because a lot of times what will happen is the way our brain and our subconscious is forming beliefs in young child years can be in such a way that when we move to adulthood, that's the way we know how to get our needs met. This is why sometimes we're attracted to conflict. If that's all we knew and we equated that with love when we were younger, we're going to seek that in a partner. Why? Because the subconscious equates familiarity with survivability. Let me repeat that again. The subconscious equates familiarity with survivability. And that's why you might find that if somebody is, quote, too nice, and you're used to dating, toxic people, but this nice person comes by, they're always available. You don't have to guess about where you stand. They're not playing this cat and mouse text game, and they're treating you like gold, and you'll all of a sudden be like, there's no chemistry. They're too nice, or they're too predictable, or it's too easy. And we'll sometimes self-sabotage and we'll push away. Now, on the surface, we might ask ourselves something like, why can't I get over that? Or why do I feel so bad pushing them away? When really, if you start looking into the subconscious itself, you'll notice that they're not really lining up with this script of familiarity that you've devised, right? This script of love looks like this. Love looks like unavailability. Love looks like lack of emotions. Love looks like cat and mouse games. Some days you're available, some days you're not. And this list can go on and on. So then the question is how do we break this cycle, and how do we start attracting a better, fit for us? Well, really, ultimately, where we have to start is ourselves. We have to look at what energy are we putting out there? Because oftentimes we'll cross paths with people who are actually mirroring back the energy that we're putting out there. And sometimes it'll look different. Like one person, like ourselves, we might be very emotionally available. and then we're attracting somebody that's emotionally unavailable, but they might share a commonality where they actually are linked by how they self-sabotage relationships. And I want to put out a bunch more videos on this and go into more detail, because I feel like this is going to be a lot I can talk about that will be too lengthy for one video. And if you want to see more topics in particular on this, feel free to drop comments in the comment section below. But one thing we can look at within is start looking at your limiting beliefs. I talked about meditation in that journaling video that I just did. Go to a quiet room, maybe put on some ocean sounds in the background. Maybe it's some calming piano music, whatever you like to kind of calm down and just unwind and be present in the moment. Take your phone, chuck it across the room. I mean, you don't have to do that, but just set it somewhere where you're not tempted to be distracted. Just close your eyes, just do some deep breathing. And I want you to look at some of the experiences you've had in your life and also try and think to yourself, when I dated that person in the last year or two, did that remind me of anything in my past? Did that remind me of maybe my friendship dynamics when I was younger? Maybe there are certain triggers that remind you of something that happened to you in school. Whatever you might find can be very useful. And then start asking yourself better questions, such as, why do I, keep maybe blaming the other people that I date? Maybe ask yourself something along the lines of, instead of asking why somebody did this to me, what can I do on my end to put out a better me? How do you want to improve as a person? Maybe you've lost sight of your goals. Maybe there's some trauma and, therapy might help. Maybe it's something where you want to start going to a gym because the gym itself may really help boost your self-esteem, your confidence, maybe get you out of this rut that you've been feeling. And it's easier said than done, right? This is not like an overnight thing. And I totally get it if it's something that is met with a lot of resistance, because remember, the subconscious likes familiarity, as I said. Anytime you try and reprogram your limiting beliefs or changing these patterns that you follow in life, you're going to get resistance internally. You might be journaling and really hitting home on some deep stuff, and then all of a sudden you find that, oh, you want to grab ice cream in the fridge. Bro, it wasn't just ice cream. That's a subconscious strategy of self-preservation to stop you from digging deep beneath, because we tend to really bury under the hatchet those deep wounds that haven't been processed. And there's another quote that I've heard is that you don't want to bleed on people who didn't cut you. People deserve our best, right? We're not talking about dating perfectly. That's impossible. None of us are perfect. What I mean, though, is that if we have a lot of undealt with trauma or insecurities or issues within, what's going to happen is that as we date, we're going to be putting that out there. And we might find that we're going to be sharing a commonality with others who have those same kind of undealt with issues. And now we're forming bonds that are codependent and that are not healthy. So this is sometimes a good thing, where maybe even stepping away from dating for a bit and start asking yourself those better questions that are more empowering. So I hope this video is helpful. It's a different topic I wanted to explore on this channel. I'm still trying to grow and add more videos, looking at about 2 to 3 a week. And if you want to see anything in particular come up, like I said, click on that subscribe button, drop some comments below, and I'll see you later. Bye.